You're on, buddy.
Is it live or is it Memorex?
What would be happening?
Today, it's working.
We are
Today we're going to work on scales and what different types of scales there are and why they sound different and how you use them. The basic scale that people first learn is called a major scale, which has 8 notes to repeat from the beginning note till it repeats an octave higher. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's basic C major scale. But there's also what's called the C minor scale. Now the difference between the major scale and the minor scale in the way it sounds is, one, the major scale goes against a C major chord, and the C minor scale goes against a C minor chord. The major scale sounds happy. The minor sounds haunting. Or sad. So if you're playing a song that's basically country, most country songs love to use the major scales. That's a G major scale played in an upper register or an upper octave. It comes from the notes of a G major scale. The G major chord comes from notes in the G major scale: a G, a B, a D, a G, a B, and a G. So it sounds correct when you play the G major scale against it. The minor scale is most often used in rock and roll because it has that haunting, eerie, dark sound. It always leads you like it's pulling at your emotions to stay along with it because it's dramatic. So I think major as bright and happy, country, folk, bluegrass, some forms of blues, and generally in rock and roll you will hear it now and then if the chords in the rock and roll song are all major chords, not minors. An example of using a minor would be House of the Rising Sun. This song is an A minor to a C chord, to a D minor, to an F. To an E major. But because this song is using minor chords, I have to play a solo based on the minor scale. That's A minor. This would be an A minor scale. So if I'm playing an A minor, I can play this A. That's part of the minor scale. That's a C note, which is the next chord. That's a D for the next chord, and then I'm going to an F. So using an A minor scale, I'm playing the melody. A, B, C, C, D, E, F. A, B, C, C, D, E, F. These are all notes in the A minor scale. So you base your solos on the scale that applies to the chords you're using. If you're playing an A minor, you want to play an A minor scale. If you're playing a D minor, you use notes in a D minor scale. If you're playing G major, you use notes in a G major scale. That's why it's important to learn the two different ways to play two scales. This brings us, though, because the guitar is such a versatile instrument, I can play the scale and travel straight across the neck. Or I can play the same notes of that scale and move up the neck. This allows a lead player, if he knows where he wants to go and what he's doing, to keep his hands down here in the first 5 frets for the country. Or if he's playing rock and roll, to move up the neck. And the reason some people want to move up the neck is so that they can get into the higher region. Most lead players consider this the meat of their guitar. This is where they play most of their solos. Country players consider this mostly the meat of their solo area, because on an acoustic guitar that most people play country with, it's much harder to play. Electric is a much easier guitar or instrument to play than acoustic because the strings are smaller, so they're easier to bend, and because they're easier to bend, they don't hurt your fingers as much, you can play the guitar longer. But then we have other types of scales. We have what's called the pentatonics. Now, in a traditional scale, you need 7 notes with an 8th note or an octave to complete it. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. That's a C scale that's going to end on the 8th note of the scale, which is a C, a repeat, 1 octave higher from where we started. These are called heptatonic scales, based on 7. There's a scale called the pentatonic, which is based on 5 notes. The pentatonics are used to death in rock and roll and blues. And the reason for that is it comes from the 5 black keys of the piano. It is less work for people to learn, and a lot of the musicians that we base our music on for blues were the old black poor musicians in the Delta, and blues came from slave music, where it was that they had no instruments that could play all the different notes. So they just concentrated on simple notes, pairings. You hear a lot of this in songs all through the black culture, all through the blues culture. Or these are based off of pentatonics. Now, there's the major pentatonic, just like a major scale, except it only has 5 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then repeats. And then you have the minor pentatonic. That was a combination of the minor pentatonic going up and then a minor scale coming down. So you can mix one minor with another minor. This gives you twice the tools in your arsenal when you're playing leads. Billy Gibbons in ZZ Top uses almost exclusively nothing but the minor and the major pentatonic for all kinds of their songs. If you go with B.B. King, he likes to use the pentatonics in major and minor and overlay different positions, which we've talked about, I'm not going to get into right now, where if you watch B.B. King, he can play any song within 6 frets. He can play any chord within 6 frets because he knows the neck so well, and he knows, because he's just using a 5-note scale, well, that takes 2 notes out of the conventional scale, and when you're looking at all the different chords he could play, that adds up to a lot of notes he doesn't have to learn. That doesn't mean he doesn't know them. But when you watch B.B. King, he will play in just one area, and his hands never move. And that's how he does that. When you're using scales, scales can be used, they're movable, if you think of them as a picture, not as names of notes. If we're going C, D, E, F, G, and we have to name the notes, then we have to know the names of the notes in the scale to play, and we have to know where they are on the guitar neck. If you think of it as a picture of dots, where in your mind you're visualizing the guitar neck with a dot here, a dot here, a dot here, a dot here, and a dot here. Just as if I'd taken a white magic marker and put a dot, 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 and then I said, play those dots. Well, that's a picture. The picture can be moved. So any scale that you learn can be turned into a picture. The picture can then be overlaid in your mind over the neck. All you need to know is, what type of a scale do I want to use, and where am I going to start the scale? Most people, when they're learning to play leads, start their scales and end their scales on the chord name that they're playing. So if I was playing a C chord, and you were playing a lead based off of that C chord, you're allowed to use the notes in a C major scale, while a C chord is being played. So you need to think, well, what is it, the melody that I hear? When I try to teach people how to come up with melodies, and this is a very intuitive thing, it's something that is based entirely on your concept and knowledge of music and how much music you have in your head to think of a song. I use what's called stair-stepping. Stair-stepping teaches you the picture, and it teaches you melody. C scale. Now stair-stepping is like going down a stairs, 2 steps, and then backing up 1 step, and then go down 2 more steps and come up 1 step, and go down 2 more steps and come up 1 step, except I'm thinking of the steps as notes. This is the note I start on. I'm going to come down 2 steps. Then I'm going to come up 1 step and come down 2 steps. Then I'm going to come up 1 step and come down 2 steps. You can also do it going up the stairs. Notice I'm trying to use 1 finger on each fret and dedicating, if I'm playing a note on this fret, it'll be this finger. If I'm playing a note on this fret, it'll be this finger. When you get really fast at this, it becomes automatic. It's not a lot of brain work, because you're doing like riding a bicycle. It's something that your hand has done so many times. It instinctively knows what to do. You just think of the picture of the pattern in your mind, visualize the neck, and your hand plays that picture. With the pentatonics, because there are less notes, it's easier to get started playing lead. Now we're going to play a pentatonic G minor. But I want to go 2 octaves to the next G. playing leads on, and it works against a G minor chord. Or you can play the G minor this way, just like an F major, F sharp, G major, take this finger off, you have G minor. Now, you saw me slide out of the pattern that I had been using. The note I slid to is this note in the pattern. So this is why we learn scales in more than one style. There's a style that takes you across, there's a style that moves you up. We also talked about in these different types of scales that we think of the 6th string and the 5th string, the low E and the A, as where we start scales when we're teaching them. So we have a 6th string major, style number 1, which will bring us across the neck. And then we have style number 2, which brings us up the neck. Then we have 2 styles for the minor. And style number 2. One takes us across, one moves us up. Then on the 5th string, we also have 2 ways to play the major scale, 2 ways to play the minor scale that accomplish the same thing. Why is the patterns different for the 6th string to the 5th string? Because the B string throws us off a half step. You'll notice when I play 1 octave of a G major scale, I can drop that pattern down 1 string and play exactly the same pattern, and I have a C major scale. If I play the G minor for 1 octave, I can do that same pattern for the C, and it works. The problem comes when you transition to the B string, it throws everything off. So when you learn a scale, you're learning another scale automatically for the first 8 notes. Then you have to work out the details of when the high E and the high B string come into play, what you actually do. A good example of that using the pentatonics is that G minor pentatonic versus the C minor pentatonic, which starts on the 5th string. That so far looks just like the G did when we started low, but when we go to the B string, for the C, for the G. So there was one note that was different, but you have to know that note is different and where on the neck it is different. This gives a lot of illusion when you're learning scales, that you learn 3 or 4 scales and you're capable of doing so much that you fall in the rut of not learning more. There is a major scale, there's a minor scale. There is the melodic minor, the harmonic minor, the enharmonic minor. Then you have the pentatonic scales for major and minor. Each pentatonic scale has 5 different places on the neck where it can be played in any key. And you have what's called the blues scale, which is a pentatonic scale which has what's called a chromatic in it. A chromatic is just a point where from one note to another note you play all the frets in between. So if I was playing a G minor pentatonic and I wanted to play the G minor pentatonic blues scale, I need to add a couple little things to it. Then I do a 3-note chromatic, then another 3-note chromatic, then another 3-note chromatic. Then I stretch this string to sound like this note, and then I play this note, and this note. You can also use 2-note and 3-note chord combinations in the middle of your pentatonic. That's so, as I said in the first video, a solo is nothing more than bits and pieces of little scales, along with bits and pieces of small chords, 2-note chords, 3-note chords, and some string stretches and repetitive licks. And then I want to use a scale to go to my next repetitive lick. And then I'm using 2-note chording. Then I go back to the scale. Then I do a string stretch. So you see how a solo is put together. It's a bunch of little simple things, but you have to learn each of those simple things. Now another aspect of scales that I wanted to show was slide. And I picked myself up a real glass Pyrex slide. Need a little more volume. When you're playing slide, it doesn't matter what type of a slide you use. The purpose of the slide is to replace the brass frets, so that instead of putting a finger down in between two frets, the sound you hear is not the finger on the string, it's the string vibrating from this point to this point. That's what makes the note. So it's the fret that actually sounds the note when you pick it, not your finger holding it down. The slide becomes a movable fret. To sound in tune, most people make the mistake of not putting the slide over the fret. The slide needs to be directly over top of the fret, touching the string, but not pushing it down onto the fret. If you're pushing it down onto the fret, it sounds like this. You hear the different notes distinctly changing. That's not what you want with a slide. You want a smooth sound with a slide. Now, when you're playing with a slide or you're playing scales, you have options. We're going to use the E minor pentatonic scale. Here's an E minor chord. We're going to use the notes E, G, A, B, D, E, G, A, B, D, E, G. And when you play that, that's the same pattern that you learned up here for the minor pentatonic. Just move down so that the head note becomes a fret. You just with a slide, play the notes, now that's very sloppy. It sounds better with distortion, but the point is, any scale that you learn, you can play with the slide. A G minor scale, generally, you want to kill the sound when you're playing slide with a finger. So most people play like this, some people play like this, some people play like this, some people will play like this. I have injuries to my wrists that I cannot play slide very well the conventional way, this way. That hurts here, it hurts here, it hurts here. So I learned to play as if it was a dobro, where I lay it down. This also helps me to see exactly when I'm over top of the fret, because I can see right through the glass. The trick in using the slide is try not to slide down, slide up. But you can play any scale with a slide. You can play chords with a slide. Some people call it the Hawaiian steel effect, because in Hawaii they came up with a cute little instrument, I assume it was Hawaii, that is a 6-string guitar with no body, just a neck. These are called lap steels. And they're made to sound like the pedal steel that has all the strings and all the pedals that you play on. With distortion, you also get a lot more sustain, and things sound a whole lot better. But that was just the basic concept of what a slide is and how you play it. Now we get to another interesting little fella called the capo. Is that about where it is in the top? Okay. The capo is a movable head nut. It replaces this and allows you to play any chord that uses this. Now by putting the capo anywhere on the neck I want, this becomes this. So I can play this allows me to play a chord form that I'm comfortable with, but not playing it in the name of the chord form as a note. This is a G. If I want to play this chord form, but I want to do it on a B note, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, it doesn't work. But if I can put a head nut right here, it will. There's my movable head nut. Now the chord works. So this is nothing more than a tool to let somebody who knows simple chords play songs in keys other than those chords. And most people see it with sharps and flats. If you're playing in the key of E, that's an easy chord. The key of E usually uses the chords E, A, and B. What if it's E flat? Or what if it's F? And I still want to use the E chord form. Now we're playing in the key of F, but I'm using an E chord form. This is a B flat. So this allows us, if someone says we're playing in the key of A flat, okay, this is an A flat. A G is a pretty good form, to use. So here was a G, 3 frets down, 2 frets down, A flat, 2 frets down. Now what I'm playing is an A flat with a G form chord. And you see a lot of people in rock and roll, and especially in country, where they use these capos all over the place just so they can use those simple open string sounding chords. The open string sounding chord is very airy, very bright. It rings out for a long time because you use a lot of strings. But sometimes it's just because they were too lazy to learn how to play a bar chord, which is the next thing we're coming to. The bar chord is nothing more than an open string chord that got moved away from the head nut. Okay, we now need to make this fret a head nut. We do that by barring, with one finger, the entire fret, and then using what other fingers we have left to play what was a simple chord. This is movable. I make it easier on myself by using one finger instead of 2. I go down in between the strings and let the meat of the finger roll over onto both of them. That frees up my pinky to do things. Or to make a suspension. So the idea is, as we talked about on the other DVD, cheating to make it easier on your hands, to make it sound better, and to free up fingers to do things like play scales, rather than playing a big monster chord and trying to do all of that. See how you run out of fingers real quick? You take a finger off of the bottom of the chord and the chord doesn't sound right. What else have we?
Does a capo help you to play lead melody in a different octave?
That depends on the guitar player. A lot of guitar players that play bluegrass they learn these things on an acoustic guitar, and they're really, really good playing down in here with open strings. But when you move that up, now you don't have that open string. Now you have to play that note that the head nut used to, and they're too lazy to sit down and do that. Okay, well what if I was starting on this note? It doesn't sound right because there's no head nut. So as a lead player, I can in my mind figure out how to play where the open strings would have been and change, or what we call transpose, from one key to another key. But it's so much easier if you're a really good player down in here to just put on a capo and then play it as if there was no capo. Because anything that worked this way will work with the capo. So you see how much easier it is, and since the chords are so much easier to play this way, because it's the same as taking a hacksaw and cutting off this much of the guitar. And this becomes your head nut. So anything that you can play conventionally, you just take the pattern that you played and shift it up to a different fret. This also has a very unique quality of giving you chimes. When you're playing up high, you get a jangly sound. And it's because the higher you go, the more treble you have. The more treble or higher frequencies that you have, the more jangly the tone becomes. And as a result, some chords sound really nice. They have a bell quality to them the higher you go up. And you will see people sometimes play. This is the 12th fret, the same as this. So what I've basically done is cut all of this out and taken this headstock and put right there. Now, to do that, I need to shift my guitar because to get the fingers right. Now, what does this remind you of? A mandolin. When I play in musicals and I have to play mandolin parts, sometimes I do that. Now, the right way to put it on, the wrong way to put it on, that depends on you. I'm left-handed. I have more in my left hand, and it's easier for me to do this because I'm not going to put my thumb down in this region, but I will sometimes hit it with my fingers. If I put this way, it's more out of the way. The problem that I have had, and it's strictly a personal problem, is sometimes, like other artists, I forget that I've got the capo on and go start another song and it's in the wrong place. When it's sticking up, it's in my peripheral vision as I can see this part of the neck. But when it's like this, sometimes I miss it. It doesn't change the way you play. It doesn't change chord fingerings. All it changes is the key to the song. So it is an option that some guitar players really like, and as you can see, I'm having difficulty taking it off with my left hand. I don't have that problem when I put it on this way. I can just reach up, take it off. Some guitar players stick it on the end. have learned for myself to not use the capo because it's embarrassing when you start a song. You're playing a song with the capo, the song comes to an end, you forget to take it off. Somebody counts off the next song, you put your hands where you think you're going to be playing a G, and it's not a G because the capo's still on it. And that is embarrassing. I learned that the way that you should play it is the way a horn player plays guitar. He actually learns to transpose in his head from one key to another key. For beginning guitar players, that's an awful lot of nonsense to learn. Use the capo. It's easier. There are also capos. As you can see, this goes against the back of the neck to protect it. It has a thick piece of plastic. And this is foam rubber, but it's very dense. You can take an X-Acto blade, and you'll see when you look at it, the indentations where the strings come across, and cut out some of those. And you can leave just the meat to maybe play this note, this note. So in effect, when you put the capo on, what you're doing is you're only really putting the capo on this string and this string at this fret. You've cut away the capo foam rubber so the other strings ring true, and then you're playing an E minor chord automatically. It would be the same thing as if. Why would you do that? Most people would do that for slide, because that, when you play slide, you would like to be able to take your guitar and make a chord out of it when you use all 6 strings. We talked about the pentatonics. We talked about, well, let's go, just because I brought it up earlier, into the concept of overlaying patterns. And we'll just touch on this so that you have it, and then later on you can go back to it. The 5 positions of a scale. First we have to know what it is we're going to play, in this case a G minor scale. We're going to use the G minor pentatonic scale. We're going to add to that some notes from the G minor pentatonic blues scale, which, remember, were 3 little chromatics stuck in there. And those are the only notes we're going to use when I do this. That's position number 1. Position number 2 starts on the 2nd note. Position 3. Position 4. I'm sorry, position 3 should have been position 4 and position 5. Now, if I named all the notes that I did down here, all of those note names occur in each of these patterns. They're just in different places. But if you memorize the patterns, then you can take a pattern and you're playing down here in G minor. Then the guitar changes to C. There is a C in the pentatonic. I can take this pattern and overlay it. And keep my hand in one place. Or I can take that first pattern and I can move that pattern up to a C note. So this gives you 2 different ways to take any scale that you've learned and move it or overlay it on top of another scale. So you can technically play all the scales in one place within 6 frets. I use this quite a lot when I'm playing blues. Now we're going to go to a C minor chord. I'm going to use the 4th position of the G minor pentatonic, which was go back to the 1st position. I'm going to go to the 5th position, which would be the D minor, but I'm going to use the 4th position of the G major pentatonic to play off of it. Then go to the 4th position of the G minor pentatonic starting on a C note. Then go back to the 1st position. This gives me versatility. It allows me to take all these pages of pictures and just reach up. I want this pattern for this part, and then I want to switch to this pattern for this part, and then I want to grab this pattern for the next part. And they're all simple little pictures in my mind of what I'm doing. Yes, I still have to know the names of the notes. I still have to be able to explain it. I have to be able to teach it. I have to be able to understand it to really get the most benefit. But if you just learn the scale patterns and you practice them with stair stepping, and in stair stepping we went down 2, up 1, but you can go down 3, up 1. You can do it in many different ways as you want. Down 5, up 2, down 4, up 3. You make that decision. But the idea is to get your fingers so used to the melodies of what you're playing Okay, another little thing that I'll do later is exercises in minors is some songs like Hall of the Mountain King. That's all minor. We also talked about harmonics. Harmonics are nice, pretty chimes. They are a weird function in physics of taking anything that has a certain length and can vibrate, and it will have places along whatever it is we're talking about, in this case strings, that have harmonic vibrations that can be accented and brought out. Some bridges fail because of harmonic distortion, stressing metal fatigue. Some cars have metal fatigue, airplanes have metal fatigue. It comes from harmonic distortion. It's a vibration that is difficult to pick up, but in guitars it's easy to hear. Now, the key to doing a harmonic is knowing first where they are. The easy harmonics are on the 5th fret, the 7th fret. There's harmonics on the 9th, but they're very weak. And then the 12th fret. Now, we had harmonics here, 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 and here. That can also reverse as you move further up the neck. It's difficult to get the harmonics up in here. We play the harmonics by touching the string and not pushing it down. just your skin touching it, and as you pick it, you hear the harmonic you lift off. You can also play harmonics to chords by hitting the strings halfway from the bridge to where the chord is. You can also get what's called a pinch harmonic, which Billy Gibbons uses quite a lot, where you take your pick and you slowly bring the meat of the pick up as you bring your meat of your fingers down around it, so that when the pick hits the string, your skin hits the string. This works for a variety of different styles of music, but it's really used mostly in Southern rock and roll and hard rock and roll. You will find it in some jazz, but most people consider harmonics to be a necessity that you use, but not something that you really have to be good at. And part of that is my generation comes from loud music. And the louder the music the louder your music is, the more control you have to have over muting your strings. When you mute your strings, you can't get harmonics. When the strings are open, that's when you can get your harmonics. And harmonics cause feedback, which makes it hard to control, so most rock and rollers don't like a lot of harmonics. Muting is something that we talked about early on, so I want to shift now to get the camera to watch my right hand. When you're playing at this volume, you don't have a whole lot of trouble. You're not going to get feedback. You're not going to have runaway distortion because the amp's not loud enough to do it. If I turn the amp up really, really loud, then when I play, the sound gets through the amp, the pickups pick up the sound coming out of the amp, it goes back into the amp, and we create a vicious loop. The vicious loop creates distortion, unwanted feedback, and you can't control it. When you're playing rock and roll with distortion, you need to mute the strings so that only the tone of the note that you play can be heard. So instead of, you want, this is done by taking the fleshy part of the palm, putting it back on the bridge, play your chord, and then move your hand slowly forward till it's touching the strings. Now in the 50s, this was considered basic styles of music. And you can play scales. But the point was to cut down on the tone and the sound so that you're only hearing the note the artist wants you to hear, you're not hearing it ring. So as a result, when distortion came into rock and roll, where we had pedals that actually take the sound, amplify it over and over and over, and then send it as a monster signal to the amplifier, and we have wailing guitars, it was all just, you couldn't discern what was being played. They took that 50s muting technique and applied it. Now, if I'm not muting, you're hearing an awful lot of stuff that has nothing to do with what the artist wants you to hear. He wants you to hear. talked about droning. We're droning a low note. Then when he gets to this part, he wants it to ring out. Then back to muting. Now, most people use heavy muting when there's singing going on. And when there's no singing going on and there's lead, they stop muting to let it ring out to make the fuller sound. Because you don't want two things competing with themselves in a song. It's either the vocal's important and the music is background, or it's time for the lead guitarist to tear it up and the soloist can shut his mouth and go get a drink of water. But you don't have two things fighting each other. You do also what's called question and answer, where someone will go, one person sings or plays a line and then another person answers to it. That's called question and answer, and you'll hear that when you're on stage playing with people. They'll say, let's do some Q&A. Well, what they mean is, he's going to play some solo licks, and then he wants me to show him what I can do to answer it. It needs to fit what he's doing. I need to see what scales he's playing, what key he's in, what positions he's using, so I can use all those same things, but with my own interpretation for a melody line. And that's another aspect of playing with other people. All this knowledge that you have, all this knowledge that you get, that you work on, has to work with other people. And some of them will have more knowledge than you, and some of them will have less. One of the things that I love to tell people is, there was a day when Eddie Van Halen or Les Paul couldn't tune a guitar. There was a day when they had to learn a scale. There was a day when they had to learn a chord. There was a day when they sucked. Everybody has to learn. They have to learn the same things. They learn them the same way. And the people that go ahead and wade into it and get it done are the people who, once the snowball's rolling down the hill and it has momentum, you don't think about all that. But everything we're covering is the basics. They're the building blocks. And even though you can't do a lot of it right now, if you stick with it, one day you will. And you'll be able to get these DVDs out, and you'll be able to look at them and pick up little tricks. I guess that pretty much is going to cover the recording for the day. If you want to get your guitar, and we'll do some things.